I just recently watched the new Super Mario Galaxy movie, and I have to say, why don't we have more heroes with mustaches? Like, I'm just throwing it out there, but maybe Tom Holland should have a mustache. There should be an alternate Snyderverse movie where Henry Cavill plays Superman with a mustache. Like, they don't edit it out. I'm just here to let you guys know that the mustache is making a comeback. I know Mario's mustache kind of looks like a small hairy animal died on his face, but at least he wears it with pride, and that's all we can ask for. But anyways, all jokes aside, let's get straight into today's video. I thought that for today's content, we could put together all of the bigger rumors and potential leaks regarding A Brand New Day. I will also throw in a little bit of speculation on my end. What are my guesses? What are my thoughts on what could potentially happen in A Brand New Day? Now, if you guys want just my personal raw thoughts on the actual film and the trailer, I will have a separate video. This is just to talk about potential Easter eggs, leaks, and what we could see from A Brand New Day. And let's get straight into it. There was a scene in the trailer, and this is just coming from me. This is what I personally think is going to happen. Now, there might be some people out there that have already theorized on this. I'm not 100% sure. I haven't really seen anybody talk about it, but there's a sequence where Tom Holland or Spider-Man is kind of like in a cocoon, in some sort of like webbing cocoon on the side of a building, and he's about to fall, right? And most people just assume that this is a nod to him having organic webbing coming from his hands, but there's a sequence or a tiny little piece where he's trying to shoot the webbing and it doesn't work. My theory on that is that it doesn't actually eventually work. He doesn't have the webbing, at least in that particular sequence. My theory is that somebody actually catches him. I'm not sure exactly who this is going to be. I mean, they could be like a million different characters. We've already seen Punisher in a couple of the trailers, so it could be Punisher. It could be Daredevil, which has already been rumored, and we have a few more potential leaks regarding Daredevil. But it could also be like a live-action representation of Miles Morales, which has been really heavily insinuated. It could also be Punisher. It could be Black Cat. It could be a number of different characters. But I do believe that that sequence, and I could be wrong on this, but it feels like somebody catches him. It's not him shooting web and then catching himself, because there is a tiny little piece where as he's about to fall and somebody catches him, he looks up like he's looking at somebody that just caught him. It could also be Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield reprising their roles as Spider-Man. Only time will tell, but it definitely feels like there's a lot more to that scene than we initially thought. Only time will tell if we're right or wrong on this one, which honestly kind of ties it back into our second theory for today's video, and that has to do with Peter Parker or Spider-Man taking on the Hand, which is kind of an interesting little twist. It's not something that we usually see in comic books or in live action sequences. We kind of always connect certain villains with certain heroes. For example, we're used to seeing Kingpin go or square up against Spider-Man, and we're usually used to seeing the Hand go up against Daredevil. So the fact that Spider-Man is now taking on the Hand, I think leads us to believe one of two things, or potentially three things. There are some rumors out there that at the end of the newest Daredevil Born Again Disney Plus series, Daredevil goes or gets arrested and is in prison during this time frame. That's one of the bigger theories. The other one, or the other two, I should say, is that Daredevil does have some involvement with this particular film. And the third one, which I'm kind of leaning towards, somehow, some way, Daredevil gets killed off from the moment of this recording till the moment that the film actually gets released. And I should clarify, at the moment of this recording, the Daredevil series is still ongoing. It's actually on its 4th episode, so we don't actually have the full-on conclusion. We don't know exactly what's going to happen towards the end of the show, but that is the working theory. And as I said, just in my personal opinion, I would probably lean more towards the idea that Daredevil has been arrested, or they've decided to kill him off in the MCU. In the larger scheme of things, it's never really quite made a lot of sense that Daredevil's going against Kingpin, whereas in most of the comic books, most of the video games, it's always Spider-Man fighting off Kingpin. So maybe that's the twist at the end. Maybe Kingpin ends Daredevil somehow, and this is, Peter Parker kind of stepping into that role and simultaneously taking on the Hand. There's also a rumor or a theory out there, and this is pretty popular. It's been picked up by multiple different content creators and multiple different websites, but the theory is basically that there is a character in the teaser trailer, and specifically in certain little sections of the trailer, where a character is actually being digitally removed, which, by the way, isn't something new to Marvel. They've been doing this for quite some time. And as a prime example, they did it with Spider-Man No Way Home. They actually digitally removed Tobey Maguire as well as Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. So that would definitely not be out of the realm of possibility. There are some sequences where it does appear like maybe somebody is being digitally removed. Who that is, we don't know at this point. I already talked about there potentially being a possibility of it being Daredevil. But, if he is killed off during the Disney Plus show, that wouldn't make any sense. Maybe perhaps a Miles Morales. There's a possibility of it just being Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield Spider-Man kind of stepping into that mentorship role with Tom Holland. Although I will say I kind of want this particular Spider-Man to be able to stand on his own 2 feet. We've essentially seen him be like a sidekick to Iron Man, and I kind of want him to flesh out as a character, flesh out his superpowers, and I feel like this is a perfect movie for him to do that. Regardless, there is definitely some editing going on. There's a character somewhere in there. We just don't know exactly who it is, but there is definitely a character that Marvel doesn't want us to see. I think they don't want to spoil anything. This will be a huge reveal sometime during the movie. The next two aren't really necessarily huge reveals. If you're even a casual Marvel fan, you will be familiar with both of these characters because they have had some pretty big story arcs within Marvel comic books. But we do have confirmation that Scorpion will be making a live action appearance, as well as Tarantula. Now, Tarantula does have a pretty modern aesthetic to him, which I think a lot of people are pretty frustrated with, because they did want something that would represent him more accurately to his comic book appearances, although I don't necessarily see that happening. His colors were just too vibrant, and I definitely feel like they needed to give him a more modern aesthetic compared to what he looked like in his first appearance. Now, I think this kind of leads us down the path of potentially seeing like some sort of montage or some sort of compilation of him fighting off different villains, because according to the trailer, there's supposed to be a bigger villain, which we still haven't seen. He still hasn't been, or he or she still hasn't been revealed. So I don't feel like Scorpion, even though he did a phenomenal job, or Marvel did a phenomenal job in Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, the animated series on Disney Plus, of presenting Scorpion as a legitimate villain. I don't feel like he's going to be a main villain here. I feel like he's going to be kind of like a side character. And then same thing with Tarantula. This could potentially be, like I said, just a small little montage, a small little compilation of clips of him defeating multiple different villains leading up to this bigger one, whether that's Mr. Negative, whether that's, them introducing a new mutant into a brand new day. We don't have confirmation on any of that just yet, but I think we're leading up to it. And I do feel like a lot of those minor little villains are just going to be throwaways, unfortunately. Another big rumor that has been circulating as of recent has to be Bruce Banner turning into some iteration of the Savage Hulk. Now, it's kind of interesting because in the trailer, Professor Banner is in his normie attire, right? He's not Professor Hulk, which is something that we've actually seen previously. If I'm not mistaken, the last time that we saw him was at the end credits of She-Hulk, where he revealed that he had a son all of a sudden, which completely broke the internet. I'm totally kidding. It didn't really break the internet because nobody was watching She-Hulk, so like 5 people found out that he had a son. But yeah, I think that was the last time that we actually visually saw the Hulk, and he was still in his Professor Hulk look, so that I think there is a possibility that he eventually transitions into some version of Savage Hulk. We don't know exactly what that's going to represent, but the simple fact that he's featured in the trailer and he is no longer Professor Hulk means that, similar to Peter Parker / Spider-Man, he is also perhaps going through a transition. Maybe he's having difficulty connecting with Hulk, and that's where the Savage Hulk comes in. Again, just a theory. We don't have any confirmation on this. The trailer really doesn't speculate on this or showcase anything regarding the Hulk aside from Bruce Banner making a small little appearance. But because Peter Parker is reaching out to him for help, it leads me to believe that he will have a slightly bigger role than we initially had suspected. Now, another big piece of speculation, and probably the biggest one, has to be that a lot of fans out there have connected Sadie Sink to Jean Grey's character, and they feel like she is definitely featured through multiple different sequences in the trailer. I don't know exactly how much weight that carries, and you honestly wouldn't be able to tell because her face is never showcased anywhere in the trailer. But a lot of people are actually pointing at the fact that Sadie Sink is actually featured in the trailer, just not her face, right? Like, we can kind of see her through glimpses. I believe we see her tied to a chair at one point, and we see some sort of hooded figure or hooded character at some point, and the speculation is that that's Sadie Sink being Jean Grey, or portraying Jean Grey in A Brand New Day. Now, personally, I think this one holds a small little percentage of possible truth, but at the end of the day, I personally would not love seeing Jean Grey or any of the X-Men characters kind of force their way into A Brand New Day. I think it would kind of like undermine what this particular storyline is supposed to be, which is kind of like a street level storyline featuring Spider-Man going through not only a transition, but meeting some brand new foes along the way, and having mutants present, I honestly feel like could potentially ruin the entire storyline. But that's just my personal opinion. It could be an absolute home run, but that is another great theory that is floating around the community. Now, I did want to save the last rumor for last, and that is that we could potentially see the symbiote Venom make an appearance. Now, as far as we're concerned, there hasn't been any like major announcements regarding the Sony universe and their Venom live action project, but apparently everything points to the idea that the Sonyverse is dead, and there's just no way that Sony is going to allow those characters to just remain on a shelf collecting dust. They make no money, they're not getting pushed to the forefront, and that would just make absolutely no sense. So the more probable situation is that they allow a lot of these characters to be featured in live action form in the MCU. That way Sony can, take a cut of the profits without really having to lift a finger. And so it just makes perfect sense to kind of integrate a lot of the symbiotic universe and potentially many other Spider-Man characters that at one point were basically untouchable, because Sony does have the all-out rights to Spider-Man and any Spider-Man related character. But seeing how they don't have any future plans to utilize any of these characters, this is basically their only alternative. The theory goes that at some point, Peter Parker or Spider-Man is going to go through this transition, turn into, I suppose, a form of Man-Spider, and then potentially the Venom symbiotic creature comes in and basically balances out what he's going through and helps him go through this transition. This also makes perfect sense in the grand scheme of things, because Doctor Doom is already being introduced, and Secret Wars is right around the corner as well. And as we know in the comic books, in Secret Wars, the symbiote actually made its first appearance in comic book form. So it just makes perfect sense to build up towards that. Maybe Spider-Man receives the symbiote here, and then eventually we see Eddie Brock introduced into the MCU. I mean, we already have a Flash Thompson in this particular movie franchise, so they could always do the Agent Venom story arc. The possibilities are endless, and the theories out there are endless as well. I could make a gigantic list of all of the best potential leaks or potential rumors that are circulating A Brand New Day, but I decided to only get the ones that really resonate with me, that I personally feel like have a very strong possibility of being featured in the live action Brand New Day Spider-Man film, and that's what we have today. If you guys enjoyed today's video, make sure to stay tuned. We do plan on uploading way more consistently. I will eventually circle back around and just give you guys my overall thoughts on A Brand New Day, the movie trailer. There we won't be speculating or talking about any potential theories. It'll just be my personal take on the movie and whether I think it will be good and whether I think it will make any money at the box office. But stay safe out there, enjoy the hobby, read some comic books, watch some movies, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.